Bismillah wa salatu wa salam. My name is Abdullah originally from Detroit, born and raised. Currently live in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm working there as a senior Muslim chaplain for the South Carolina Department of Corrections. Been Muslim for, been Muslim for ages, man. I've been Muslim since September of 1992. September 1992. So life before Islam, I was a young man. I was in my 20s just before I accepted Islam. And I think my life before Islam was the typical life of a man in his 20s in North America, in a big city, or in the military, which I was in the military. Is that a lot of partying, a lot of womanizing, a lot of drinking, perhaps recreational drugs, usage, etc. And no real direction, no real plan, whether that has to do with a plan for life in a secular, economic, career sense, or in a spiritual sense, like having a spiritual path that I intend to walk and achieve a certain objective in the afterlife. So neither one of those things really, and I think throughout the whole time, I had consciousness. I believed in God, and I believed I wanted to serve Him. I just was confused about how to go about it, and the religious theologies or the religious traditions that I had come in contact with, none of them were satisfactory in my eyes. I wasn't convinced by any of them, and so I was a firm believer in God and a disbeliever in organized religion, basically. So that's how I described myself before I accepted Islam. Well, I'm gonna be honest with you, especially at this moment. I don't think I've ever felt as fulfilled as I feel right now. Increasingly closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I feel this heightened sense of spirituality, a heightened desire to worship Him and draw close to Him. And I'm not just saying this because it sounds good. I'm saying this is how I actually feel internally, especially at this moment, right now. The things that I'm doing, as far as the work that I do with incarcerated Muslims, as far as the work I do, as far as da'wah and the teaching that I'm doing in the masjid, interacting with Muslims and teaching them, and some of the other things that are going on in my life right now. I'm feeling pretty awesome, to be honest with you. Okay, so as I said, I was always conscious, always believed in God and His existence and His right to be worshipped. And when I did wrong things, I felt it. I felt it internally. I felt bad. I felt like it was wrong. I just didn't know how to get myself out of that predicament and that never-ending cycle of committing sins and doing wrong things. And I was in the military, as I mentioned, and ultimately the unit that I was in got deployed to Saudi Arabia, and ultimately Kuwait and Iraq for a conflict that was going on over there. And that just gives you an opportunity, when you're in that environment, that just gives you an opportunity to really reflect upon things. And it was the perfect environment because when we returned from the deployment and we're getting ready to basically process ourselves back to the States, I spent an extended period of time in Al-Khobar, which was a city in the eastern province of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And obviously the Saudis are Muslims. And so I'm in this Islamic atmosphere and basically being exposed to da'wah by immersion. I'm immersed in what? In an Islamic atmosphere, and I'm being invited or bombarded with messages of what? Of Islam, whether I like it or not. And so that exposure was really good for me, and some of the things that I saw when I was there ultimately, influenced me to start to read and to research about Islam. So, for example, when we would go up and down the streets in our free time in Revert, go up and down the streets, and we would see groups of people with whether they had coffee, whether they had tea, whether they had dates, whether they had some other type of refreshment. We're walking up and down the street in fatigue and basically wreak havoc on that part of the world. And in spite of this reputation that precedes us, as we're walking up and down the street, they're inviting us to partake of whatever they have. Tafaddalu ma'ana. Come and join us for tea. Come and join us for coffee. And so this amazing generosity and open-heartedness, which is something that you don't really see in, for example, the West. I saw it there, and that made me reflect. Another thing I saw is an aman, safety and security that's rare, that you don't see in, for example, the West. So, for example, you have people who are street merchants, and they're selling things of value like watches, they're selling radios, they're selling alarm clocks, they're selling garments, whatever they're selling on the street, things of value. And when they have to leave those items for whatever reason, for a brief period, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, they wouldn't pack those things up and put them in the car and lock them away, but rather they would just take a sheet and cover it. And that was sufficient to protect their belongings or their commodities from being what? From being stolen. And that's something you just couldn't do here in the West. You don't have that type of security and that type of people refraining from taking an opportunity like that to basically steal something of value. Another thing, a person could pull up to a convenience store, basically park his car out front, leave it running, go inside, do some shopping, come back out, and find his car as is, unmolested. Again, because of what? Just because of the level of security that they have in the country that is unparalleled. And so that's another thing that really struck me and resonated with me. We used to cross, they have this huge street downtown, very wide street. In the middle of it, they have like a little hadith, a little park where people can go with their families, and they have like playscapes and grass and different things. And we used to cross over that street from one side to the other, have to pass through that hadith, that park, and you would find a person during the midday siesta just lying there, taking a nap, and with no fear of being mugged. Again, something you can't do even in some of the better neighborhoods in the United States. You just can't do that. You just can't just let your guard down and take a nap in the open in a park and not fear that you'll be harmed. So this type of safety and security, again, it struck me. It said, how is this happening? What is the source of the safety and security that they're experiencing here? Another thing I noticed was that they had a very strong commitment to prayer, to worship. So you're walking down the street, and there's shops on your right side, shops on your left side, restaurants, etc. A lot of activity. And then you hear the call for prayer, and all those shops and all those restaurants shut their doors, and people file out of them and head toward the mosque to pray. And again, that type of devotion and commitment to God's worship and stoppage of seeking after the dollar and leaving that, quest for worldly wealth and temporal pleasures to gain the eternal pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of God, is something you just don't see in non-Muslim societies. So that was another thing that really struck me. And so all these things, I'm seeing them, this is all a type of da'wah, all a type of proselytizing and invitation for me. And it had me reflecting and thinking about Islam as being what? As being the true faith. And so when I returned to the States, gathered a bunch of materials about Islam and started reading. And the more I read, the more I became convinced, and I couldn't find any fault in it. Couldn't find any contradiction in it. Couldn't find any glaring, shortcoming in it. And I said, any faith like this that can produce this type of generosity and open-heartedness, this type of safety and security, this type of devotion, and you can't find a fault in it's airtight, it must be the truth, and I have no choice but to accept it, which I ultimately did. And since then, I have never regretted the decision I made. Never felt like maybe I didn't make the right choice. Maybe that wasn't. I've never felt like that. I've always felt convinced with my choice, and very happy with the decision that I made. And not only that, but I just feel spiritually fulfilled. I feel like this is the best thing that I've ever done in my life, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And again, I'm not saying that to be cliche. I really, really feel like that deep down. And so I guess that's the transition, basically. That's the answer to that question. My advice is, if you're thinking about Islam, you obviously believe in God. You believe in His existence. You believe in His right to be worshipped, and you're just not sure if Islam is the path that leads to Him. But what you have to be sure of is that He wants you to follow that path that leads to Him, and that if you sincerely want it, He's not going to turn you away from it. If you sincerely want to follow it, He's not going to turn you away from it. Because ultimately that's what He wants from you, that's what He expects from you, and He's going to hold you accountable for doing that or failing to do that. So that being the case, who better to turn to request your heart being open, especially considering that He's in control of the hearts. So if you're having those doubts, if you're having some trepidation, if you're hesitating because of a lack of complete certainty, then you have to turn to Him sincerely with an open heart, and you have to beg Him to what? To show you, to make it clear to you, and to give you the strength to give you the guidance and to give you the strength to do what is right and what is pleasing to Him. So that's where that's the advice I would give, is that don't go it on your own. And don't say that I'm going to wait until, I feel something or I see a sign, or no. Turn to Him and ask Him to open your heart. Because if He doesn't open your heart to it, no matter how convincing what you read is, no matter how good your experiences are when you interact with Muslims, all that notwithstanding, if He doesn't open your heart to guidance, if He doesn't give you what we call in Islam a tawfiq, okay, He doesn't enable you to recognize it as truth and to embrace it, you'll never embrace it. So we are 100% dependent upon Him to enable us to follow His guidance. And that's why Muslims, they pray at least 17 times a day. They make a specific prayer and they say, Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. Oh Allah, guide us to the straight path. And there's two types of guidance that are being requested. One is that we be guided to it, that He shows us, that He directs us, He makes us see the right path, recognize it as such, as truth. And the other guidance that we're asking for at the same time, simultaneously, is to be guided on that path and protected from taking detours that will take us away from that path. So why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why would He make us make a prayer like this 17 times a day if we weren't desperately in need of that? desperately in need to ask him for his guidance to the path and on the path. So that would be my advice, to really ask him, beg him, and do it repeatedly. This is not something you do once, it's not a one-off thing, but it's something you should be doing regularly until what? Until that moment when you feel your heart just come, bursting open, and Islam pours into it, and you know that this is what I need to be doing, and you're ready to take that step. Well, what I would advise people who come to Islam is that, unfortunately, as sad as it is, your Islam is only going to be as good as the company you keep. And so you need to be in the company of good people. You need to be in the company of good people, and people who you see in them those beautiful qualities and characteristics that invited you, called you to Islam, that encouraged you to accept Islam, made you gravitate towards Islam. Those are those qualities. Be around people who actually exemplify those qualities. And if you do that, then a lot of those doubts, that uncertainty will go away. But if you're around Muslims who much of what they do is in contradiction to what you read, that's where those doubts are gonna set in. And what is difficult for many of us to do, as sad as it is and as wrong as it is, it's the reality, is that we're unable to divorce and to separate between Islam and Muslims. And so if we see Muslims doing something wrong, then we say Islam is wrong. Doing something bad, Islam is bad. Being hypocritical, Islam is hypocritical. No, that's not the case. But that is a human reality. We have a hard time divorcing between these two things and distinguishing between those two things. So that being the case, you need to be around good people. And unfortunately, though, you might find those good people are rare. So you don't have this large number of people with whom you can associate when you first come to Islam. Your Islam is very fragile, very weak, very new, and very vulnerable. You won't have. You have to be very selective who you associate with, because you want to associate with people who are going to do what? They're going to nurture your faith through their behavior and through their practical encouragement. They're basically being a good example for you and role model for you. As the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, he said, "Al-mar'u ala dini khalili." He said a person is going to follow the faith of his closest companion. فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مَنْ يُخَالِلْ. So let each one of you, look and take care and mind who he associates with and takes as a friend. So that being the case, as I said, your Islam is going to be only as good as the people with whom you associate at that early stage, and you're not at a point where you can actually rise above. So at that stage, you need to be around good people, and they may be limited in number, but the people who you see them exemplifying those qualities that brought you to Islam, then those are the ones you need to associate with. And the other ones, you need to try to distinguish between Islam and Muslims. Islam is perfect, the Muslims are imperfect. And so when you see imperfections, that doesn't detract from the truthfulness, the accuracy of the Islam that you've accepted. Again, faith is not something necessarily that comes all at one moment, all at one time. It's not necessarily something that comes at the first instant or in one instant, let's say. And some of the companions, they talked about this, how they learned faith. Basically, they learned, what is Islam, what are they supposed to believe in general. And then they learned the Quran, or they studied the Quran, and it increased them in what? In faith. So if a person believes in the most fundamental beliefs, so they believe that there is no deity worthy of worship except the creator of everything, and that creator of everything has appointed Muhammad as his messenger and revealed to him the final testament, okay, the last testament, the final revelation, if he believes that, and he's prepared to what? To believe what follows that, okay, over time, in time, then he should accept Islam. That person should accept Islam, and they shouldn't wait and say, well, there's this one thing that I'm having trouble with, and until I can get past this hurdle, then I'm not going to accept Islam. They shouldn't do that. If they believe in this fundamental, the oneness of Allah and the messengership of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if they believe in that, then they should start their journey. And if they're sincere, then any areas where they are having some difficulty fully accepting and submitting to a particular dogma, then they'll overcome that in time. Allah will open their heart and enable them to what? To embrace it.